Who wants a pot of coffee? I just make coffee. You want a cup of coffee? Sure, there you go. Who wants coffee? Anybody else want coffee? Who wants coffee?
And now it's time for the man with the caffeine, the new tropics for the brain. It's Coffee with Mike. Hang in, hang tight, grab your cup, and let's get this thing started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Java Chat. You got Coffee with Mike here, and I have a very special guest today who I've been excited to interview because he's been MIA for a little bit, and we kind of wondered what happened to him when he disappeared, and he came back 10 times stronger than what he was before. It's some really good stuff, and I'm sure he's got a wonderful story to tell. We have with us David Morelli. Hey David, thanks for joining us on Java Chat. Glad you decided to come by and have a cup of coffee with us.
Happy to be here. Glad to be here. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah.
So, David, I'm going to read a little bit to you guys about David's history because Dave's got a really interesting backstory. So he's the founder of OwlHub, peak performance executive coaching leadership training company. He's been a professor. He was part of the executive MBA. This is what happens, and that's why we have editing.
Yes.
Give me a second. So David's a professor of leadership, communication, strategy, and entrepreneurship in the executive MBA program at the University of Denver's Daniel College of Business. He served as executive director for executive education. He's done a lot of stuff in education. In that time, he's also become an expert in a wide range of arenas, including neuroscience, crisis management, peak performance, leadership styles. That's kind of different because most guys, I'm a leadership coach. Leadership styles. I'm probably going to want to dig into that a little bit.
All right.
Persuasive communication, design thinking, improvisation, storytelling, and more. So he's coached millionaires, billionaires, musicians, movie stars, best-selling authors, and executives all over the world. And he's guided teams through the crisis during 9/11, through the Great Recession, as well as other financial industry and marketplace disruptions. And there's been a lot, so I'm sure he's been quite busy. The bottom line is, he's got a lot of history behind him. He's got a lot of experience, and I wanted to ask him on here because that experience is invaluable to all of us, I'm sure. And it's one of the few times I get to actually talk to somebody who has that kind of experience and can come and share it with our listeners. So really appreciate you stopping in, hanging out with us. And I wanted to kind of start this off by asking you, what's a real solid piece of advice for business professionals and entrepreneurs when it comes to succeeding in what they're doing?
Yeah. The thing that drives, I would say, me, and by the way, it's always humbling to hear the story of my story in a way, like, just because I think when you live it, you're just kind of like, all right, next thing,
go. Yeah, exactly.
You sort of do your thing. Right. And then you go, oh, hey, there's this.
Wait, I did that.
Themes, I don't know. Yeah. But, for me, I would say the biggest thing that has been a driver is mission, right? Like having some kind of mission or purpose or alignment or something like that where it drives you. So, for instance, OwlHub, it's a newly formed organization. My wife and I co-founded it together. And our social mission is equity and leadership. We're actually a public benefit corporation.
Nice.
So it's a combination, if you can imagine if like a regular corporation and a nonprofit had a baby, right? Like it would be called public benefit corporation.
Nice.
So for us, we are launching this event called Peak Performance Week coming up, and it's going to be streaming out to 100,000 people, and we have speakers from Google and Disney, and we're a little baby organization. Like we are just coming out of the womb, and because of the social mission that we have, though, we are attracting incredible talent. So for us, that's our reason, right? That's our mission, our the thing that we do it for. And so if you don't have something that you're doing it for besides just like, oh, I want to make money, like there's something bigger if it's driving you. It will capture the hearts, minds, and attention of people in a different way, as well as will drive you in a different way. So
That's what's interesting. We have interns that we work with, and one of the things we just went through was designing a mission statement for the marketing agency.
yeah,
And we took a couple weeks to go through it. It's a little faster than I would like to, but they only have so much time, so it's
sure.
kind of a high pressure deal. But one of the things that I asked them was, is like, we got to a point where we said, okay, can we work with this now?
Yeah,
Is this doable? Is this enough to where we can say that we serve our clientele and are able to help them more than helping us, while saying we have a culture that's good? And they said, for now, yes, it'll probably change into something later. And then I asked them, I said, so I want your opinion. What do you guys think of the partnership? Because it's 3 partners here.
yeah,
And one of our interns says, well, it doesn't speak enough about how fun you guys are. And I said, well, again, this will probably evolve into something else. And as you guys do more and learn more with us, maybe the right words will come out and we can change it. And most entrepreneurs don't like doing that. They're control freaks, and they're just like, well, it's got to be what it's. And I'm like, no, I'm going to let these brilliant little minds have fun with this and see how this goes. And they haven't disappointed. But the mission statement in and of itself, I think the alignment of values, the alignment of thoughts and dreams and things of that nature, worth way more than just, who's my next client? Where's my next check coming from? And I see a lot of that going on right now with a lot of the guys that are helping, agencies do their thing. Their success stories are based on so-and-so signed this kind of contract or signed this kind of client, and for this much.
Yeah.
Keep talking about the dollar. And I'm like, I don't see anybody talking about the mission. Either that, or I'm not putting in the right search terms on Google. You know how that works.
Right. Absolutely.
So when is Peak Performance Week? Let me ask, because that came up. When does that happen?
Yeah. It's October 5th through the 9th. And it's all free. It's streaming online. So my wife and I, we decided to found OwlHub partly because we had this event in mind. Like, hey, we should do this event and it was right as the sort of pandemic crisis was happening, and we said, people need support in being, able to get their mindset right during this time where we're all sort of figuring out, like, now what do we do, right? And then organizations were cutting down, which means that the employees who are left over needed to do more with less. And oh, by the way, people who don't have jobs, they need support, and so we hugely decided to invest $100,000 in making this event. And so we're bringing together, as I mentioned, various speakers from like people that were sort of out of my league in a way.
Yeah.
I'm like, holy cow, like, how in the world did we get those? And those people, and it's partly because people want to give back, and so I think for me that kind of mission can seem scary, though, for some, to bake it into their organizations, to have it be not about them. That can be a little bit of a scary proposition, because you're like, well, wait, I'm an entrepreneur, aren't I supposed to be like driving for the dollar or whatever you were saying, right? Like, but at the same time, if you have a long enough lens, everything comes. You just have to be persistent enough to get to where you want to go. So Peak Performance Week is like, half day each day for a week, where people can just come and get free training on how to become more productive, more happy, more fulfilled, leadership stuff, all that.
For those of you that are wondering where that is, go down in the comment section. We're going to make sure to put that link in there so you can sign up and get on that, and I'm probably going to be one of them, because I'm always interested in that kind of stuff. Anything that has to do with improving. You made a good point, and I think a lot of people forget that being an entrepreneur is about problem solving.
Yeah.
And looking down the road at how your solution to a problem will benefit the public, not benefit your pocket.
Yeah.
And I think a few people miss that point, because they're just like, well, I had a friend recently post that they went back to their previous profession because they missed a few things. Being an entrepreneur, you usually don't have a 401k. You usually don't get medical benefits. You have to provide for those things on your own privately, and they're not cheap. And I think for the most part, when you, and it's not that they weren't good at it. It's not that they weren't worth their weight in gold and then some. They're actually really, really good at what they do. It's the stress and the things that go along with it. Plus, they have a
Oh yeah.
family and they
Oh
have
yeah.
a normal life that they had to live. And then the whole pandemic thing comes out and really messed things up for them. So they chose to go back. They may come back. In fact, I really hope that they
Mm-hmm.
do, because I honestly think they're worth every dime that they charge, because of the results that they produce and the amount of help they give to somebody's brand when they get involved. My thinking on entrepreneurship is, if you're a problem solver and you're always looking for the next problem to solve, eventually finances don't become an issue, and those other things that you miss eventually go away. Now, it doesn't happen in the first 2 years. Sometimes it doesn't happen in the first 10, but it's there. It's the mission driven entrepreneur is somebody who will always be successful. You and I both know a few people and have interacted with a few people that make way more than we do and much higher status than we are. And when you look at them and their heart in what they do, the good ones, they don't ever talk about that. They don't ever talk about how much their company's making. Multi-million-dollar company. Yeah, but let me share with you what we've done. Just like what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Let me share with you whose lives we've touched and how we've improved and how we've made things better for humankind. And
Yeah.
I think that's a portion of where you and your wife went with OwlHub. And I wanted to ask you about the brand. Why OwlHub? How did you guys come up with that?
Besides, it's funny. We were sitting down like late at night on a Saturday, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And we'd been pounding away for like a week. Like, come on, we've got to find a name, and everything that we had searched was either taken or or it had to be this giant long
I
name,
know. Yeah. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
brutally long name. And so we started thinking, and she pulled up something about, she pulled up a picture of a cheetah for some reason, and she was like, "Oh, an animal. That's interesting." And then it clicked in a couple of these things, and we said, "Well, what kind of thing? Leadership development being one of the things that we do, and what kind of animal would be sort of associated with this?" So we went through a couple, and then we thought owl because of wisdom, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
want to bring more wisdom to the world. And then hub was kind of like where those people gather. And so OwlHub being where wise leaders gather. And for us, that sort of resonated. And then we searched it and, oh, wow, it's available. And it's like 6 letters long. Like, who gets a name anymore that's 6 letters long? It actually
We
is
didn't.
not. Yeah, absolutely. So we went around and we surveyed some of the people, some of our inner circle on, what do you think about these names? And so that's you can see the little, like, we have a little
Yeah.
owl like face on the
Nice.
thing.
Nice.
I just love, yeah. So anyways, yeah, we decided to go with OwlHub.
That's a great idea. Good premise and good background on that one too. It's always interesting to me to hear how people come up with their brand.
Yeah.
Oasis Media Group was something that a friend helped refine.
Mm-hmm.
And another friend actually, this is when I was doing it on my own. The acronym of Oasis Media Group came out one day. Somebody came out and says, "Do you realize what that is?" And I'm like, "Oh, geez, no, I didn't realize that." So I flipped it to that for a little while. And then, of course, things evolve over time. It just wasn't serving, and it wasn't enough. So Oasis Media Group, it's an oasis in the midst of the desert, and we're able to bring in a lot of water to dry land. So
we started doing our our initials. We were like, oh, age, yeah. So we used that. We had that too.
Have you heard of huh?
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
Not
no.
huh? Oh.
Right.
There's way too much.
Yeah. So.
There's way too much you can play with that one. That's excellent. Yeah. So when it comes to like some of the people that you've served, what are some of the trends that you noticed when it came to some of their challenges?
Well, so OwlHub is a relatively new entity. So we are, as we're, our big first event is Peak Performance Week. So
Yeah.
that's coming up. But prior to that, I mean, I've been in this world for over 20 years, and so I would say, I went into an organization. I had a longtime client, a CEO client, who we'd worked together for a while, and he said, "Hey, let's try this experiment." He said, "Why don't you come in and coach the entire organization?" At which point it was 60 people, and it was a perfect timing for me. I was looking to make a little bit of a transition from what I was doing to something else, and have. He goes, let's try it as an experiment, 90 days. Let's see. Let's survey people before and survey people after, and find out what happens. And so I went in and I did one time a month for these 60 people. The managers actually got 2 times a month.
Sure.
But, went in, and after 90 days, job satisfaction went up 56%.
Wow.
People's sense of performing at their best went up 74%, and then their confidence in their work and workday went up 84%.
From just once a month.
From once a month, yeah. Because people, they benefit a lot from saying, let me think about what I really care about. Let me solve some of the problems that have been pressing on me, right? Let me figure out how to have that difficult communication that I've been looking to have. And so we worked at that, and the CEO said, "Hey, how about we try it for
another 90?
Let's try it for So we actually went for a year, and
Nice.
And the revenue growth rates went up 52%.
Oh, that's
year
awesome.
over year, with only introducing coaching. And so now it's 6 years later. The company is worth, they went from a valuation of 35 million to now 3 billion.
That's insane.
So
just what one time a month would it actually be?
Almost 100. Yeah. And so I ended up running strategy and talent development for them. And
awesome.
Yeah. So this stuff works, like helping people be at their best and perform, like the peak performance crossed with helping them become better leaders, or get on the path to becoming leaders, and then crossed with coaching. I mean, that's sort of the genesis of some of this, is wanting to help people at scale in a way that really takes a lot of the insights and the work that I was doing there, but provides it to people sort of at a larger level. So
who's the, I wouldn't say the perfect avatar, because your kind of field, there is no perfect avatar, but who is it that gets served well by this? Yeah. So I've been playing around with where are the limits, right? So I'm in the process of getting my PhD. I'm in the midst of my dissertation, and so they call it boundary conditions, right? Like, so nice. Who is it and who isn't it, right? And so I've been trying. I'd like a copy of that when you're finished, honestly. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I'm actually building a new leadership model, executive coaching model, and then pointing to something that executive coaching hasn't explored. So it's in the works. Yeah, it's man, fun. Secrets, man. What's up with these secrets? I know. Well, if I shared it, then it's. Oh, not, I know. I got you. So, it's all good. But I'm totally excited for you, dude. That's pretty exciting. I mean, thanks. You're creating something new that no one's touched yet. That's innovation and origination at the same time. That's pretty damn cool. Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. As I stumbled on it, it's funny. The other night I was saying to my wife, I was like, "Hey, this actually might be a real contribution." Like, it's like, because I got into it, I was like, "Hey, here's a place." You think about it like, here's a gap, right? Yeah. But is it a meaningful gap, right? So I was just like, well, here's a gap that's interesting to me. And then as I've written it and been working on it, like, there's a there there. There's like, a there. Actually, there's a there. Yeah. So that's cool, dude. Right on. Yeah. So I've been looking at it, and so primarily it's people who are in the corporate space, right? Mm-hmm. They're somewhere in that level, and we actually have 3 different avatars for the different. Mm-hmm. We have the main program that we have is something called OwlHub, right? And so, like, I remember you mentioning something about that. Yeah, and so we have a buy one give one program. Mm-hmm. So similar to like Tom's Shoes, where they sell a pair of shoes to you, and we send it off to somebody in an underserved community. Well, we do the same thing for leadership, where leadership program for you, we have a leadership program that we give to somebody in a youth in an underserved population. Smoking. That's awesome. Try and balance out the equity of the world. Well, it's I
Yeah,
think you're
yeah.
doing more than just
So
equity balance. You're actually bringing forward the next gen of leaders in a
that's, I
proper
mean,
in a proper manner. They don't have it available to them, not through any conventional educational means.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and I mean, we can't really just talk about equity without addressing, the youth and how
yeah,
they think about themselves and how they're empowered with tools and all that. So we're, we're bringing on somebody from that used to be on the CEO cabinet at Yahoo, and
nice.
she's gonna, yeah, she's awesome. She was probably 10 plus years ago. She took coaches training from me, and so we've been really tight ever since.
That's sweet.
She's amazing, and so
That's awesome.
she's going to run that program. So mostly the underserved populations are going to be people of color, and she's a woman of color, and so she's going to be running that program, and so that there's representation, and it's
Right. No, that's
yeah. So,
you hit a good point. Is that a lot of, and I I don't want to single out any one ethnicity, but there's a lack of tools for a lot of the underserved communities.
yeah,
They just, again, it's just not available. To be able to bring something like that to the table where, a corporation is able to benefit themselves and sponsor community education. I mean, literally, they're now able to say, here's part of our social good while we're benefiting us.
yeah,
We're raising up the next generation of leaders and getting them
yeah,
to think. Getting them to think. 'Cause I
yeah,
have a real issue with how things are rolling right now, kind of around the world in some cases, where people aren't thinking critically. They're being
yeah,
told what to think and not how. And I
yeah,
think that's a lot of coaching that I've had anyway, is teaching me how to think and how to think critically about things. I want to do good for other people. That's great. But
hmm,
where is that really going to serve? Where is it really going to help? Is it really helping just you? Is it really just
yeah,
helping them? Is it a balance? It's, that whole balancing act thing.
yeah,
Um, but when you look at it, it's just information and knowledge. And if you share it, like how you guys are doing, which is amazing, by the way, I've never heard anybody doing that one. Um,
thanks.
I think the effect overall will have the same kind of long term as the company that you just mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
Socially,
yeah,
I think it really will.
yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, you think about, like, I remember one person saying, and I can't remember who it is, so otherwise I would quote them, but
Sure.
they basically said, you can do anything with your time, and the size of your life is determined by the size of the problems you choose to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I thought about, like, okay, well, I'm now gonna start a company. What kind of company do I want to create? That message came back, like, what's the size of the problem that you want to solve? And
Mm-hmm.
when I mentioned initially to the Emily is her name, she's from the CEO cabinet. I said, hey, here's what we're doing. She's like, wow, that's a big problem. Like,
Yeah,
equity and leadership, like, that's a big problem,
that's
and
a
it's
huge problem
complex.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she said, and I mentioned how we were looking at solving it, and she's like, kind of like, well, damn, that'll work. Like that'll at least put a dent, right, in some of the stuff, because it's trying to address it at a fundamental level, right? Versus there's so much that's just layered of shoulds, right? It's like, oh, you should do this, you should think this way, you should act this way, and that's good. We need that, but we also need things that are beyond the shoulds, because sometimes people put up walls to shoulds,
A
versus
lot of people should themselves as well, and that's another problem. I should do this.
yeah,
I should do
right,
that, or I should have done this. And it's like, guys, that's not serving you, and it's certainly not serving
yeah,
anybody else
yeah,
around you. So instead of should, how about do?
yeah, yeah. And so that was our stance, is let's just do something that we feel good about, that feels like is aligned and integrous to, and it doesn't necessarily say, oh, I have all the answers. No, but I can empower people with some tools to get them, the tools that they need. So
What's really cool about that is that, and I've noticed this across coaching, it's never about having the answers,
mhm,
because the answer is never the same for any one person or any
yeah,
one organization. But the tools don't ever really change, do they? The
no,
principles, the
yeah,
guidelines, the things that go behind leadership and things of that
yeah,
nature, the tools are usually the same.
yeah,
The answers that you arrive to are probably divergently different in a lot of cases.
yeah,
But I think a lot of people miss the fact that there are these tools. And
yeah,
you bringing that to the youth giving
you
them tools so
mentioned,
early.
oh, good. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I agree with you. It's empowering people with tools is part of where it is. And you said, where's your avatar, right? So I said, well, it's sort of, there's the corporate space, but I realize full well that entrepreneurs can use this just as well as people within organizations, right? And so there's slight tweaks, but I think those are sort of the two things. And around tool sets, we were talking about leadership and leadership styles. You said you sort of wanted to come
Yeah,
back to
that
that.
was cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are various styles of how you could lead. I think we think of leaders and there's this sort of, if you will, directive, like I'm going to tell you what to do, right? This is sort of based on the leadership research.
Right.
Like there are lots of different styles. One could be more of a collaborative style where it's like, hey, what do you think about this, right? Also called participative. There's another style that's about building relationships. And so there are some people, I'm sure you know, Mike, that there are certain people that if they asked you to help them move, you are much more likely, because it's them, than like somebody else who would ask you. You're like,
Right.
no, you.
Yeah.
Yes to you. And why? Because it's the quality of the relationship and how
Right.
much depth and care there is there. And so that's also a part of leadership. And there's authentic leadership. It's like, oh, this person's so real, right? I'll follow them because they're real. Like I trust who they are. And there are other kinds that are more about, charisma and motivation, it's called transformational leadership. And so
Right.
there's all these different styles, right? But one thing that we don't realize talking about shoulds is that there's almost any style that lines up to you authentically. I mentioned authentic leadership. Whatever's authentic is probably the best way, but it's realizing that there are friction points on you. You might have, like, you can't share every thought you have. You gotta be like, oh God, what the hell?
Yeah.
Why do you, like
Yeah.
that is real a negative. So like, what can you do to work on yourself? Which is why I find leadership exciting. It's about leading other people, but it's also about your own personal growth.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like, oh wow, this reaction comes from somewhere. Where did that reaction come from? And how can I realize it's not about this situation. It's about this reservoir of all this unprocessed crud that you're carrying around, that when something happens outside, it triggers a reaction inside. So it's not about the moment, which to me, this is going to sound judgmental. It's not meant to, but it's a little bit of a weak position to have your history determine your present moment, right? And how you show up with somebody else. And so to dig and to clear out the clutter, if you will, or the crap, and actually be as present as you can for another human being in interaction is serving them in a whole different way. And so leadership is a path of growth, at least in my mind.
You remind me of a story that I learned long time ago from one of our elders. I don't believe she's alive anymore. But she told the story about how we love to carry around a bag of manure. She didn't say it that way.
Yeah. Right.
But she says, it's interesting. We love to carry our shit around.
Yeah.
And it's in this huge bag over our shoulders. It weighs us down, makes us feel weird, makes us feel out of place sometimes. He says, but you know what? You know what shit can also be used for? It can also be used as fertilizer. And if you just unpack it and put it in the ground, you'd see what kind of things can grow, including the stuff that you like. And you triggered that, and I was just like, mindset's huge. Mm-hmm. Are you going to have the mindset of, I have a lot of shit and I'm going to judge you based on that? Or am I going to take that, unpack it, just like you said, unpack it, lay it out on the ground, let it fertilize, and let it make some things grow. And there are going to be some weeds in there. Cool. Pull the weed out, take a look at it, bless it, throw it away.
Yeah.
Let the rest of the garden grow the way it's supposed to. Be a farmer. Be a farmer of life. Be a farmer of good things.
Yep.
I did good trigger, man. I appreciate that. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I was just talking to, so we are recording and prepping for some of these sessions in Peak Performance Week. And so yesterday I was talking to somebody who is going to be on the Peak Performance Week stuff, and his name's Jeff Bloomfield. And so he is an expert in
Why do I know
persuasion,
that name?
selling ideas. don't know, but
Yep. Yeah. I know
good dude.
that's why. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So he's great. I really enjoy him as a human being. He's got a great heart, great alignment, and all that. And so, long story short, we're in this conversation, and he has a 4-step plan that he's going to be talking about. Like, here are the 4 steps to persuading and doing it ethically and alignment and all that. And one of them, the first one, is actually around vulnerability. And so right. So you just talked about, take your shit, lay it out on the ground, like let it, be open and be in the air. But if you were to say, like, hey, I'm really nervous about having this conversation with you, that is going to lead to a lot more heart from the other person.
Sure.
Or like, hey, I feel really, scared to say I don't have the answer in this moment, right? About whatever it is. That's a lot more real and vulnerable, which ends up getting the best of people to lean forward. But if you try and hide it, and you're carrying it around and it's in the bag, and you don't want anybody to, you try, shoo people away, like, get out of here, don't look at my stuff, right? It's a completely different experience. And so, but we're all afraid of it, to open up and say, here's how I'm not perfect, right? Here's all the things that I suck at, and I could use some help with this, or, all that. It's this funny counterintuitive thing. The thing that I call it, we defend our pain.
Yeah. That's a natural habit, actually. I mean, it's a natural instinct.
Yeah. And so, but if we stop doing that, and if we invite in support, and we say, I acknowledge and own these things, and then people are kind of like, oh, cool. All right, great. I like you even more. Right. Yeah. Like, how did that happen? So that was his first step in the persuasion sort of formula, if you will.
Interesting that you mentioned that. Hey guys, we're going to take a quick break, and I want to come back. You remind me of another story. So we're going to take a quick break for a message from the sponsors, whoever they may be, and take a good listen, because they're good sponsors. We don't just bring on anybody. And we'll come back and we'll talk about that story. And we'll edit this part out too. So
yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah. And back in 3, 2. So we're back here with David Morelli and chatting a little bit about leadership styles, which was really cool. And talking also about being vulnerable. And it reminded me of a story. And of course, the brain farts kick in, and the story just kind of wilds away on its own. It's just.
Well, see, there you go. That was exactly what we were talking about, is, being vulnerable and saying, like, hey, here's the reality, right?
It's what do they call it? It's not all. It's Alzheimer's. It's I forget all the time.
Yeah. There you go.
But it makes sense, being vulnerable. What were the 4 steps again?
Yeah. So the 4 steps that he had outlined was, first, sort of have vulnerability. The second part is really looking at them and saying, what do they need, right? Like, how can I support them, right? And then the third was really around, what's the problem that they're facing? Really defining and helping to define that problem and articulating it in a way that says, I know you're dealing with this pain, right? And then the last thing is, and here's how I can help you, right? Some kind of solution. So leading, he talks about in his life, he tells a story about growing up on his grandfather's farm. And that's sort of like a personal connection, and all the stuff that he learned, and then he goes into talking about sort of the empathy, like, hey, we've been dealing with this issue that has us have these same kind of problems, and oh, by the way, here are the definitions of those problems, and here's some solutions. And it's all based on neuroscience. So it's called the neuroscience of persuasion and selling ideas, because we all have great ideas, we just don't know how to communicate them. And so that's what one of those sessions is about.
I think a lot of people, if they were honest, are always afraid of how to communicate properly, because we were raised to communicate a certain way.
Yeah.
And everybody's way was just a little different. So yeah, the nervousness is real. I mean, when I get on a sales call, I'm not always sure what people want to get done. When I'll have conversations with clients, and I'll be just like, so I know why you said you wanted to talk, but let me ask you a few questions first. And that's really the whole, unpacking the box to see where the real issue is.
Yep.
Because not everybody thinks it's one thing, and then you go digging, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, wait a minute, isn't that the problem? I never thought about it like that.
It's Well, here's the funny thing. Not only does question asking, I'll call it that because that's what it's called in the
Yeah,
research. Not
sure.
only does question asking help in discovery, like discovering what actually needs to happen, but there's a study done at Harvard where this was done in speed dating as their sort of context, and so they had people to say, "Hey, you're in the high question asking condition. This other group, you're in the low question asking condition." And what they did was measure likability of the person who was having the interaction, right? So high versus low question asking. Well, they found that the person who was doing either the high or low question asking felt like the person liked them the same, right? But when they surveyed the person who was being asked the questions or the person who was being, not asked questions about themselves and things, they found that the likability was completely different.
Sure.
The high question asking person was much more well liked. But here's the weird thing than the other one. So here's the weird thing on the side of whether you're going to make a statement or ask a question, you think that it's the same, but it's actually not. You're much more likable when you ask questions. And so there's power in saying, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Or, "Hey, what are the problems that you're really facing or that you're struggling with solving?" And so you have obviously a natural gift in knowing, intuitively, hey, go in and ask questions, and a lot better stuff happens.
And I think a lot of that too goes back to the fact that humans are much more, what's the word, amicable to the fact that you're actually interested in them.
Yeah.
And what's going on with them. Second is that you're outside of their storm. They're in the middle of it. You've seen this. I mean, how many executives have you worked with where you just see a freaking whirlwind blowing around them and they can't see past their own nose? And it's not their fault. It's just that's how fast the world moves, and that's how business moves. And to be able to take them out of that storm and go, "Hey, hold on a second. What about this? What about this? Have you thought about this? Why did you think this in this particular situation?" And really get them to slow down.
Yeah.
Which a lot of our people don't realize how fast humans think.
Yeah.
I mean, our brains run how many trillions of processes in less than milliseconds or something like that? I don't know what the research is, but the idea that a brain can roll that hard, that fast, and think we can handle it. Survey says,
right.
I mean, if you survey 100 people, I don't know what the numbers would be, but I'm fairly confident that it would be decently high. A lot of people would say, "Yeah, I'm not really sure. I just go." And, hopefully it works out.
Yep.
By the way, if you have that leadership style, it's a bad idea.
That's hilarious. By the way, you mentioned like a lot of things swirling. So there's some research that shows the brain processes 400 billion.
400 billion. Thank you.
Bits of information every second, but is only able to consciously process 1,000.
Wow.
So
that is decidedly less. Holy cow.
So, which means that all the swirl is real, right? Like that is cognitively supported. That's real. And so we're trying to make sense of the world that we find ourselves in the midst of the storm, as you said. And so coaching, as you mentioned, or asking questions helps people get clear and points their attention in different areas where it's a blind spot because, we're trying to process so much, and we can't be afraid of our blind spots. We have to lean into them. And
I want to bring up something.
Hey, I need your help to see this.
I want to bring up something to that point because I have a lot of friends that are younger. Well, that's not saying much. I'm almost 50. I have a lot of friends that are younger than me that are going through this whole thing with anxiety and depression, and it's real. It's real, and I think it's a combination of a couple of things. One of which is this whole 400 billion a second and only be able to consciously process 1,000. How many blind spots can we possibly have? A ton.
Yeah.
So when life comes at you from one way or another and you feel like you got hit by a Mack truck or a freight train, are you off? Is there something wrong with you? No. There's nothing wrong with you. It's called life. And I think if more of our youth realize that, there's anxiety moments for everybody. You're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
You're not wrong for feeling it. You're not wrong for being depressed. You're not wrong for feeling overwhelmed. It happens to all of us. I'm a Gen Xer. In our generation, there was no such thing as mental health awareness. We were told if you have a problem, you get killed, walk it off. Take a lap.
Yeah.
I mean, that's extreme, but you get the point. That's how we were raised. Is like, no, you just deal with it. Unfortunately, we came up with a lot of coping mechanisms rather than actually dealing with it. So it's kind of a bad thing at the same time. But I mean, the idea of it's okay to feel what you feel.
Yeah.
And it's a good idea to go and find someone that can, and somebody that knows how to help you with it. Not somebody who's going to commiserate with you or just validate, that life is shit. You need to find somebody that can help you unpack all of this stuff. Coaches are great. Therapists are great. Consultants sometimes can help with that. Hell, I've done it in sales. I've actually unpacked somebody's bags one time, and I was just kind of like, wow, I didn't even think that was going to happen. And they didn't become a client, and that's fine. But they left with a better attitude coming out of that appointment than they went in. They weren't a client. They didn't fit my model either. It was just not, it wasn't fit. But to see them come to that realization of, wow, cool, thanks.
Yeah.
It's the experience of life.
Yeah.
It's meant to be an adventure, not a travesty or a chaotic mess.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to mindset and personal leadership, if you will.
Yeah. It's funny. One of the reasons we founded this company was also to your exact point. Like, we realized that if people can feel empowered, they can have tools, they can shift their mindset and have opportunities and techniques to do it and all that. Really going to be serving the mental health of society, solving some of our biggest challenges. But I'm not a therapist, and so I can't go directly at the mental health side. But I do know, we have an employee who just came on, rock star, but he had a terrible work role prior to this. I mean, he was running marketing, a terrible experience with the culture. The culture, he said, was incredibly toxic, and it just, he ended up going to therapy, and his therapist said, "Hey, you should quit. Like, this place is awful. Like, you got to get out of there." And so,
not a good place to work.
The reason that we're the reason that we're then focused on culture and building cultures and leadership is because it affects so many of our lives. And if we can create healthy cultures, and we can bring out the best in human beings, and we can start to chip away at the mental health issues that are in the world, right? And so that's part of why we do what we do too.
So how does a corporation realize, one, that its culture has these issues?
Yeah.
And how do you address it?
Yeah. So one litmus test as far as your culture goes, and this is a little bit of a strange take on it, but the question is, who are you losing?
There is no stress. There is no strange. No. There is only a way. We must find the way. What is that way?
I love that. That's you got a great radio. Yeah.
The corporate world is completely inundated with toxic environments.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I would say the question is, who are you losing and why? Right? Because there's always going to be fall off, and hopefully it's not die off, but there's going to be, like, who are you losing? And so a toxic culture will usually end up losing high performers. So, like, I don't need this, right? Like, the people who are your best performers, if they leave, you realize, oh wait, this isn't good, because they either got burned out, because they're not being valued or validated, they're not being invested in growth, they're not feeling like there's opportunities for them, all that stuff. So the question is, who do you lose? Now, if you have, like, everybody loves just being around each other and all that, and like they want to hang out together outside of work, because this is like having a best friend at work is one of the litmus tests, if you will, for how good your culture is. So people who have a best friend at work are much happier, more engaged, all that.
Sure.
But on the other side, like, if people are like, man, this place is cranking, but it's really not for me, usually it's the person who's a low performer in that environment. Now, there's a mistake that you haven't engaged that low performer, so yes. But if you're losing low performers, it's a sign of a healthier culture. The question, though, is why is if there's burnout or toxicity as to the reason that they leave,
Right.
then that's a sign of a toxic culture, right? So it's really, you have to dig into a little bit. And I would say there's this one test, like the test of you as a leader is, would the people on my team move across the country to work with me if, let's say, they didn't work here or they weren't on your team or whatever? Like, would they move across the country to work for me? If the answer is no, then you have a lot of leadership development to do, right? It's like, well, I mean, they like the job. Cool. That's not an acceptable answer,
Right.
In that's not you fulfilling your leadership potential.
Right.
That's you sitting in a seat.
Yep.
Right.
Taking up space.
Yeah. So to me, that's part of how you tell. And then the what you do about it, there's a lot of things you can do about it, but it usually involves engaging, hearts, minds, passions, helping people see their path and how they can grow in the role that they have, and helping them accomplish their goals. That it usually has a lot to do with that.
One of the best examples I can share of that is from back in the 90s. In a very you wouldn't think this, but I actually saw it happen. And it was in a fine dining restaurant, a very well-known chain back in Hawaii, where I'm from.
Oh yeah.
And he was a great friend of ours. I was an entertainer for 15 years. For those that have listened to this, they've heard this story a few times. Not the restaurant story, but me being an entertainer. Downstairs was a fine dining restaurant. We used to go down there and visit with them, and we always talked with the manager, and he was a good guy. Literally, the room manager's responsibility was to make sure that the experience was complete and awesome for the guests. Well, he also made it a point to make the experience awesome for his team. So during one of the economic recessions, they decided they were going to close the restaurant. They did a few things that weren't too cool, and he decided to leave. That outlet ended up finding themselves with no employees. He left, they left. He went to a new place. They all, well, except for a couple, all of them followed him.
Yeah.
He was one of those guys that really cared about his team, so much so that they'd go running over a cliff with him. If he said, let's go, they would follow.
Yeah.
And it's because he cared. I mean, he took time out to do things that most managers just like, that's not my business. I don't give a crap. Now, he didn't get into their personal lives.
Yeah.
But he got into it with them with ours. This is what you should be doing. This is how you should do it. And here's why. He didn't just tell them. He explained it, and then he showed them, and then they started doing it. And because of that, they did it exactly the way he wanted them to. And they ended up making more money because of it. So
and
the
they
bottom
probably got,
they probably got what?
Oh, I was gonna say they probably got feeling invested in. They probably felt
Very
like
much
they were getting to their goals, etc. Yeah,
very much so. Very much so. Hey guys, want to take one more break and then we're gonna wrap it up. We're getting real close, dude. We've been going at it for a bit now.
Yeah.
I warned you, rabbit holes.
All
right, guys. So we're gonna take a quick break and we'll be right back. One more message and we'll talk a little bit more about David. All right, be right back. Hey guys, so we're back at Java Chat here with David Morelli, the founder of OwlHub, one of the founders. Junior partner, your wife.
She's she's awesome. Hallie, we co-founded this deal. She's great.
I want to go back to the story of how you two decided to go after this. I mean, for one, I've never seen your wife before. I went to the website and I was like, oh, his wife's in this. That's awesome. This is a family business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how long have you guys been together?
Well, we've been together for probably 6 years, and then we've been married for 3.
Congratulations on both.
Yeah, thanks.
And does she come from a similar background as yours, or?
So she has a degree in psychology as well as nutrition, and then
awesome.
Yeah, she's been really interested in this world for over a decade, and so like she's done video and film marketing stuff.
Sweet.
She has a master's in marketing, and
two good faces for a great cause. That's awesome. So you have you also have a podcast. It's called called Awaken, I believe.
Well, as probably this moment, I think we just transitioned over into Owlcast.
Okay, cool. So it's
Yeah,
OwlCast
so
now. Right on.
OwlCast, the leadership and coaching podcast, is the sort of tagline for it. So yeah.
Awesome. And then, and of course, guys, again, it'll be in the comments, so we'll make sure to get that all in there. How often do you guys broadcast?
We do once a week.
Okay. It's
Yeah.
kind of like us.
Yeah.
We're interestingly enough, recordings today, I have 3. I wasn't expecting that. And I looked at my calendar. I went, what happened? How did this,
Yeah.
who booked these?
Yeah. Totally.
And then I realized, oh, I did. Oh, okay.
Right. Absolutely.
It is what it is. So where can people find you, man? I mean,
Yeah.
OwlHub.com, obviously. Is there any other place that they can connect with you that's worth doing so?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously,
Absolutely.
You know, right. Facebook is always an option, but probably the main, like, URLs are OwlHub.com, peakperformanceweek.com, and then on iTunes for the OwlCast, you can just type in OwlCast and leadership and coaching podcast. It's got the same owl, right, that I have on my mug.
I totally dig that logo, by the way. That was a great.
It's like we had so much logo trauma and like it was so hard. I gotta tell you, we were it took many renditions. Let me just say.
I had to tell you that when I did the OMG logo, I looked at it and I went, okay, this is going to be temporary. I just needed to look like something that looks like it's going to grow something, and it ended up looking like a financial planner's logo. And I went, yeah, okay, for now, that's fine. We're actually redesigning corporate identity. A lot of people, I don't think people understand how much work goes into a logo. Most people think you just go to Fiverr and have somebody design one, and that's it. And it's like, have you guys ever seen a corporate identity file? I have a friend that used to work for Mercedes as a graphics designer in Germany, and he's like one of those true Germans, and everything's got to be measured out just perfect. He showed me the logo file, the corporate identity logo file for Mercedes-Benz. If that damn thing didn't have a graph, measurements to actual, it almost looked like it was measured in microns.
Yeah.
It was deep, dude. And then the explanation behind, of course, was all in German. I didn't understand any of it, but the whole design behind that little tri-star, I was looking at that going, how long the hell did this take to get done? He goes, you don't want to know.
Yeah.
I'm like, so if you're thinking about designing a logo, please don't just run to Fiverr and just here, do this. It should look like this, and then pray for rain. It doesn't work like that. Obviously, with you guys having the wonderful traumas of logo design for OwlHub, how did you guys settle on that one? What about that?
Oh man, so here, if you don't mind, I'll bring it up.
Do it.
So we wanted something that looked like an owl, that wasn't too cute, but wasn't also like too old looking, And so we ended up the eyes are also like an infinity symbol.
Nice, like that. Very good.
So that, and then the little nose inside, and then the eyeballs. And the question was, well, we had to add little sparkles, little flecks to the eyes,
cool.
in order to make it seem like they're real eyes. And so we ended up with logos where we had a lot of logos, and the question was, do we just say good enough, or do we say, you know what? And we also wanted something that was a cross between a tech company feel and something that also could be consumed as like, oh, okay, your leadership development, but it's also kind of a different take on it versus, like you said, you could have a financial planner like type of logo. And
sure.
We could, So we ended up trying to find that right feel as far as the company and the reflection of the values and all.
Cool, Bill. Who's your ideal client? Who's your best? Who are the ones that you could best serve?
Yeah, I think it's people who are growth oriented, right? If you don't want to grow, like, other places you should go, right? Like the other things you should do. You know what I mean? There's lots of things you can do with your time.
In a world where
love it. Yeah. So growth oriented people who really want to make a difference in some way, shape, or form. Again, it could be inside of the corporate space. You have a corporate job, or it could also be you're an entrepreneur. Not that we can't serve other people, but those are sort of the main markets. The examples that we use will sort of resonate with those two audiences.
I agree. I think, and I would think, though, this is not to contradict your ideal. Anybody that wants to learn the principles of leadership should. And the reason for my thinking behind that is leadership is both internal and external.
Yeah, exactly.
And the internal side is one that we just talked about here in this podcast. The internal side is very important. I mean, if you can't lead yourself, how do you expect to lead others? If you can't unpack your own shit and be vulnerable and be able to do those things, that's not even from a sales standpoint. That's just being. Just being. Yep. I talk a lot about American business etiquette. Been certified in that for years and use that to teach leadership as well. Because the idea is basically be present. Just like you said earlier, it's about being present and understanding, you know, being in that moment with that person, not judging them, but basically allowing them to unpack what they need to, possibly asking more questions, or possibly just being there.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us forget that because we want to be right about things, and we end up doing the wrong thing by trying to be right.
Absolutely.
What's that old saying? Would you rather be right or would you rather be loved?
I like that. That's so true. I 100% agree.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not the fact that you're not right. Is it going to be at the expense of losing a relationship that could be beneficial? You know, everybody has a perspective on something.
Yeah.
Right now, perspectives are being thrashed.
Yeah.
In our country alone, our perspectives are being thrashed, and it's sad to me. Yeah. Because there's a lack of empathy on all sides, and then there's the guys in the middle that are like, no, we have empathy. We just wish you guys would quit. If you're willing to be in love with your own humankind, the being right goes to the side for a little bit, at least till you guys can find some common ground to talk.
100%.
I think that's a big thing. And being a leader, you have to be that way, because as a leader of a company of even 60, you're going to have various perspectives on different things, and you're going to have some real hard, staunch perspectives to either side, and that's okay. Yep. They're there to help make the company grow. How do you lead as somebody that is able to say, we all have different perspectives, it's cool, but we all believe in this one mission, right? Okay, so let's do that one mission.
It's kind of like integrate and elevate.
Thank you.
Like integrate people's perspectives and elevate
lift
the conversation.
Yeah, elevate the conversation. Make sure that it's respectful and it's loving. If there's, and I know that sounds real, but it's honestly, if you have a loving conversation with somebody versus just a conversation with somebody, the outcomes are usually decidedly different. You know, if you have to agree to disagree, you don't walk away mad. You just walk away, and you come back and you still love the person. You still come back, and it's anyway. Another subject for another time. We're gonna have you back. We're gonna have to dig into this.
That'd be great. Fun.
Cool. One last question for you.
Sure.
And this is I ask everybody this. You've experienced a good degree of success in your own past. Up to this point, what right now is the biggest challenge for you guys?
You know, just like a house, putting it, you know, you can only build as tall as your foundation. So putting in the right foundation is the challenge. We're setting up all the systems and all the, you know, philosophies and, you know, the marketing and, you know, building out sort of these deep foundations so that we can really grow to fulfill our mission. But man, foundations take, you know, it doesn't look like anything's happening because you're putting stuff into the earth, but like it takes forever. And it's sometimes a slog and you get dirty, you know, they're just like, you're digging away and you're like, why am I still digging away at midnight, you know, or whatever. And like, so to me, it's if you want to build something significant, be willing to put in the foundation, because the foundation really will have you be able to build what you want.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your insights, brother. I'm really excited that you're back. I'm totally excited about OwlHub and LeaderHub and all of that, and looking very much forward to seeing how that all blossoms. Awesome. And please stay in touch, and we'd love you back. Yeah. At your leisure. I know you're busy, especially with everything that you're doing. So just let us know, and we'll come back and we'll run down some more rabbit holes.
Awesome. Love it.
Everybody that's listening,
and hopefully helpful.
Kidding me? I learned stuff today. Absolutely. Guys, if you haven't, make sure you subscribe. Hit that bell. The bell is the one that tells you when we put up a new one. So make sure you hit the bell on YouTube. If you're on Anchor, Stitcher, CastBox, iTunes, whatever, make sure you download or subscribe. If you happen to listen to us on Anchor, you can support us, make a donation, and keep this little mini podcast going. We do appreciate every one of our guests and every one of our listeners. You know how we like to end. We love you all. Make sure you stay up, stay safe, stay healthy, and live. From both of us to all of you, ciao for now.
Thank you.
For more information on Java Chat, visit www.javachatpodcast.com. You've been listening to Coffee with Mike on Java Chat. Tune in weekly to this podcast for the next episode. You can also download or subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform. A production of Oasis Media Group, LLC. Located in Las Vegas, Nevada. Copyright 2019. All rights reserved.